Despite Tiana's many attempts to talk her out of it, Charlotte remained adamant about joining them on the ride to Alabama. Even worse, when Mr. LaBeouf asked where they were going, Charlotte simply told him they were going for a drive out to the country. She claimed it wasn't a total untruth, seeing as the drive between New Orleans and Mobile was mostly country roads. Tiana knew better than to try anything like that. She had the LaBeouf's driver stopped over at the home she shared with her mother, Eudora, in the Ninth Ward. Once there, she explained to her mother exactly where they were going, how long she expected the journey to take, and when she would be returning. Her mother insisted on meeting Prince Naveen, and it wasn't until she received a promise from John that he would not let Tiana out of his sight that she'd agreed to allow their road trip. Tiana might have been 19 years old, but as far as her mother was concerned, she still wasn't old enough to travel through 3 states without an older adult present. After receiving her mother's blessing, they set out. Naveen sat in the front seat next to John, while Tiana and Charlotte sat in the back. About an hour into their drive, Naveen looked back at Tiana and asked, "Are you sure we will be there in time?" "Well, seeing as I don't have a crystal ball, I can't be 100% certain," Tiana said. "But John is going to do the best he can, right, John?" Tiana called to the driver. John tipped his hat as he looked at them through the rearview mirror. "I would love a crystal ball," Naveen said. "Convenient for making plans, and probably a nice conversation starter." A laugh burst out of Tiana, surprising her as much as anyone else. Naveen grinned at her. "So," Charlotte said, "what's it like being a prince without a princess, Naveen?" Very subtle, Lottie," Tiana muttered under her breath. It makes for an uncomplicated life," Naveen said. "Oh, I know just what you mean," Charlotte said. "I tell Tia all the time how much I hate the thought of being tied down." Tiana shot her a look of surprise. "You what? Ow!" Lottie pinched her. "Something wrong?" Naveen asked. "Oh, she's okay," Charlotte said. "Now, speaking of settling down, I know I will have to do so eventually. I'm sure you have those same pressures." "Very much so," Naveen said. "It is something my family tells me all the time." "Why don't you tell us about your family?" Tiana interjected. Then, realizing that might be a sensitive subject, she changed tack. "Actually, how about telling us what brought you to New Orleans? I'm sure you're disappointed that you're leaving so soon." "I am," Naveen said. "I have had my heart set on visiting New Orleans for as long as I can remember. I love jazz music, you see, and I have always wanted to visit the place where it was born." "Oh, I absolutely adore jazz music," Charlotte said. "I wish I'd learned how to play." She positioned her fingers as if they were a horn and badly whistled a tune. "You should learn," Naveen said. "It's never too late." "I may just do." Just then, the vehicle popped up in the air and landed with an ear-splitting crunch. "What happened?" Charlotte called. Even before John spoke, Tiana knew the news wouldn't be good. The thick black smoke billowing from underneath the car's hood was her first clue. The pungent aroma of kerosene was the second. That smoke doesn't look good," Naveen said. "Do you think we should get out of the car?" "Yes, right now," Tiana said. They all filed out of the car and backed several feet away from Mr. LaBeouf's brand new Ford Model T Tutored sedan. "What happened?" Charlotte asked again. John pointed to the roadway. "I believe that large rock is to blame," he said. "I'm sorry, you three, I didn't see it." "This is a disaster," Naveen said. "How far are we from Mobile?" "It is still several hours' journey, I'm afraid," John said. A loud whistle rang out, scaring them all. Tiana looked to the left. "Train tracks." "I have an idea," she said. She motioned for them to follow. After collecting Naveen's bags from the car, they walked through knee-high grass and across the shallow ditch until they came upon the rail cars. "I knew it," Tiana said. "That's the Southern Railroad line. It goes right through Mobile and directly to the port, if I'm not mistaken." "How can we be sure?" Naveen asked. Well, I guess you'll just have to trust me, unless you have a better idea. I think it's safe to say you have all the good ideas, Naveen said. Tiana smiled despite herself. But Tia, I don't think that's a passenger train, Charlotte said, peering over. It isn't, Tiana said. She grabbed the handle with both hands and pulled. The door opened to reveal tightly wound bales of hay. But at least it'll be a comfortable ride. Who's up for an adventure? Me, definitely me, Naveen said. Tiana marveled. She had never seen someone so in the moment, despite whatever outside stress he must have been wrestling with. It was kind of refreshing. Charlotte squealed, clapping her hands together. Miss Charlotte, I'm not sure your father would approve, John said. Daddy will understand. I'll explain everything to him when we get home, Lottie replied. Let's go. We'll ride the rails like a group of vagabonds. Only Charlotte would consider herself a vagabond while wearing a Madeline violet dress. Let's do it, Naveen said. He hefted himself into the train, then held a hand out for Tiana. Charlotte followed her into the train, while John coming up behind, carrying Naveen's bags. You're leaving the car? Tiana asked him. Well, I considered which would anger Mr. LaBeouf more, leaving the car or letting Miss Charlotte go on without a proper chaperone. Good call, Charlotte told him. We'll come back for it later, John said. As they all settled in, Tiana tried to get comfortable, but the hay wasn't as forgiving as she had imagined. It poked, it scratched, and smelled plain awful. Something tells me you're not used to traveling like this, she said to Naveen. He repositioned himself against the hay bale. I cannot say I have ever traveled in a rail car full of hay before, but life's an adventure, eh? Tiana noticed a little twinkle in his eye. You never finished telling us why you came to New Orleans. It can't be simply because you wanted to listen to jazz music. You could have done that in the cafes abroad. He shrugged. It was more than that. I am not sure if I should tell you this, but, Tiana encouraged, my parents may or may not have cut me off from the family funds. They what? She cried. So how will you get me the money you promised me? I will get it, he said. I know my father. When I tell him why I need the money, he will not hesitate to repay your kindness. You see, they do not have a problem with sharing their wealth, but they have developed a problem with sharing it with their son. What did you do? Tiana said. Why am I to blame? Because parents don't just cut their children off without any good reason, she said. He shrugged. Well, I guess I was a bit of a moocher, he admitted. I have never really had much of a plan, nothing to fill my days. Work is boring to me. I'd rather have fun, wouldn't you? My work is fun, she said. At least the work I want to do. And what kind of work is that? A grin traveled across her lips. I want to open my own restaurant. I've had my eye on this old sugar mill for ages and saved just the amount for the down payment. And now once your parents send that telegraph, I'll be able to get it all up and running quick. You know what they say, the first month is always the hardest for a new business. He set his jaw upon his fist and looked at her with keen interest. What kind of food do you plan to serve? Oh, the usual, she said. Jambalaya, red beans, and rice, crawfish, and tofu. But I'm going to put my own spin on all the classics, except for my daddy's gumbo. I'm not changing a single thing about that recipe. It's perfect just as it is. Your eyes light up when you talk about it. Tiana shrugged as if she was hit by a sudden wave of modesty. She'd become so used to folks making fun of her dream that she rarely talked about it with such enthusiasm, especially with a stranger. But Naveen's attentiveness made her forget he was a stranger. I wish I could find something to do that makes me feel the way you do about your restaurant, he said. You know, your eyes lit up when you were talking about jazz. You ever thought about playing music for a living? His face instantly brightened, but just as quickly, the light in his eyes dimmed. I am afraid my family would never take me seriously if I chose music as a profession. But if it's what makes you happy, maybe they just want you to have something like that in your life, Tiana said. Why don't you have a talk with your parents when you get home? You may be surprised by their response. Naveen stared at her, a smile slowly building across his own lips. He shrugged and said, I will think about it. Who knows, maybe you are right. They rode for some distance in silence, the melodic rocking of the train car almost lulling Tiana to sleep. But her restful state was jarred when the train screeched across the tracks, pulling to a sudden stop. What now? Charlotte asked. Tiana stood and walked to the door. She pulled it open and peeked outside. Uh-oh, she said. I do not like the sound of that, Naveen said. There's a train porter checking the cars, she said. If they find out we're hitching a free ride, we're in a load of trouble. I can't get caught. Big Daddy would kill me, Charlotte insisted. And I will miss the ship back to Maldonia, Naveen added. What are we going to do? Charlotte asked. There's only one thing we can do, Tiana said. Run,